The whole origins of Gamergate 1 is erased from the internet because journalists went on a warpath and they paper mache'd this narrative over the whole thing. And Gamergate 1 was made up of all walks of life, minorities, Caucasians, left, right, center. Everybody was involved with that, and including some very big names like Cernovich. Cernovich was GG1. People probably don't remember that, but we were all there, and we were all saying, "Hey, there's a problem here with ethics in gaming journalism."
Hello, Culminators. I hope you're having a happy new year. I hope I'll be having a happy new year. It's not the new year yet because we pre-record these, but if 2025 goes the way it ought to, then it won't be 2024, that's for sure. In any event, today we're going to talk to someone that is full of surprises and is really just one of the most interesting people we're going to meet. This is Grummz. This is Mark
Hey,
Kern. That's
how's
you.
it going? Yeah, good to be here, Ron. It is a long time we've been trying to get this together, and finally glad we had a chance. Is it
Yes, well,
2025? Are we in the future now?
we are in the future, yes. But that
Awesome.
doesn't make this any kind of multiverse, none of that. So, what's interesting is I followed Grummz years ago, and he followed me at some point. And I didn't have much insight into or interest in the gaming world. And today, on a scale of 1 to 10, I've increased that from 1 to maybe 2. I'm not, but there are two things. One is that I fell in love with the avatar. I it is so appealing and ageless. Is this a 6-year-old boy, a 16-year-old boy, or a 36-year-old man? I don't know. But it just looks like someone that you can hang out with and certainly have a nice time and not no threat to you in any way. But also I found that I did find that his takes were interesting to me in a way that most gamers are talking about stuff that I simply don't understand. And what I came to understand about Mark is that he is a very broadly educated guy with lots of experience as a business person, as a tech person, and and even has a law degree. How'd you
Rumor
get
has
to
it.
how'd you get to this point, Mark?
I was, I don't know, rebelling against my Asian parents, probably. So
By,
I
well, because by demonstrating the lack of focus.
yeah, by insisting I go into games after getting a law degree. Basically, I'm actually half Asian on my mother's side. My dad was probably a German American descent, and was a pilot in World War II in Vietnam. So that was an interesting. Growing up overseas in Asia, 8 different countries, military bases mostly. Lots
Army
of
brat. That's Air Force brat,
Navy,
Navy
Navy,
brat.
Navy slash CIA. Have you heard of Air America?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my dad was Air America.
Son of a gun. Okay, so you definitely had a taste for the exotic.
Mm, yeah, I didn't appreciate it growing up because you move so often and you don't make friends for very long. That I ended up
Oh, but then you have
resisting.
an excuse for not making friends for very long.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's with you forever. You can pull that card out anytime. But yeah, I didn't appreciate it till later in life. The perspective that gave me, being overseas, growing up in those countries, especially in wartime, right? Like, I remember being a kid in we were living in Udon, Thailand, and there was a
All right, so
borders.
so you're old enough to your dad flew in Vietnam.
I was born in 1968. Yeah.
Okay, so you're only a few years younger than I am. So you the very early years of the war were really
Yep.
your I mean the very last years of the war were your early childhood.
Yeah,
But
and they were fighting in my neighborhood. I mean, I remember as a kid an incursion across the border because we were very close to the border, where there were literally gunfire going off, and then I remember trucks and where like the troops were responding, but they were hardly troops. They were just dressed in whatever they had, armed with machetes, going out against guns. Right. So this
this
was
was in
nuts.
Thailand.
This is in Thailand.
People don't
Thailand.
appreciate the extent to which the Vietnam War destabilized, or let's put it this way, the extent to which the Vietnam War was merely one aspect of a profoundly destabilized situation or unstable situation in French Indochina, I guess you could call it, or the Far East.
Yeah, it was a crazy time, and since Dad was military, that's kind of what I grew up with, and didn't come to the States until it was time for college. Really, my family on the U.S. side's from Ohio, but I went to
You
college
kind
in
of have a Midwestern accent, actually.
well, it's an overseas accent. I went to international schools. Do you know what those are?
Yes.
Those, yeah, it's where they send all the expat kids and overseas. And so I had that education, and I guess the accent is whatever it is. Although interestingly enough, I had a British accent in first grade and kindergarten because I went to a school in Singapore, an expat school, and it was all British at the time. So
That probably did not help you make friends.
no, it was very unusual. I was also born with red hair like my father, which would be very shocking now if I still had it. Because I look Asian, right?
All right, so there you are having these experiences. You're back in the States for college, or back in the States. You're in the States for the first time. You've grown up identifying as an American,
Yep, yep.
although with these kind of Asian tones because of, well, you're first of all you're half Asian, and second of all you're in Asia for so much of this time.
Born and lived there, yeah.
But
And
you're
first time was hitting the US was upstate New York. And that was cold. Let me tell you, that was really cold. University of Rochester. And I arrived midterm because I had like I was sick the first semester, and then I came in second semester right in the dead of winter, no time to acclimate, and my nose felt like it was going to fall off my face. And we got
Rochester.
yeah, Rochester. We got the lake
That's
effect snow.
really cold country. Whose
Yeah,
idea was that?
yeah. Well, it was really me because that's the only school that accepted me because I was so busy doing extracurricular activities in high school like drama club and theater, and I was actually tutoring the other students, and they were getting into colleges, and I was not taking high school seriously, but I was tutoring them to
This
pass so they could
explains
get
some.
in.
This is why we get along. Okay, now I understand.
Well, you wait till you hear what I did in law school, and so
All right,
and
yeah, keep
so
telling. I like how this is going.
yeah, my specialty, my undergrad was in cognitive science and AI, which has come full circle now and become fully relevant these days. Back then, it was kind of considered a stagnant field. There wasn't much progression. Neural networks were kind of laughed at, which is of course the basis of everything we do in AI today, or much of what we do in AI. And that was very interesting to me. And so I did that,
It's
and I
interesting
was
to me that they had that at Rochester in the 80s.
they had a very good vision program. So I was into computer vision and
Vision,
also
because Rochester is where Kodak was,
yes,
and money came in from Kodak for all
you
kinds of
got it.
stuff that would enhance the photography world and the imaging. And they, notwithstanding that, they still turned
They
down
really
the
yeah,
turned
they
down the
screwed the
digital
pooch.
camera.
They could have had it all, man, but that was sad. But yeah, I did computer vision, cognitive science, and then I said, oh, I kind of want to go to law school, and so that's when I went to, and I had much better luck applying to law schools.
Okay, now, but was there anything you said, like your segue there was rather abrupt?
Oh, Well, I'm
Did you
trying to
want
keep it
to
short.
go? Well, did you want to go to law school because of some issues that came up in the course of the work you were doing, or just like a lot of people in that era, including, no, not including me. People told me I was going to be a lawyer since I was out of diapers, but I'm not quite sure what else to do, and I talk good, and maybe law school would be fun. What was it related to the intellectual interest that you had at the time, or
Well,
was it because you were a theater kid?
you remember how I kind of sloughed through high school?
Yeah,
I was having challenges in first couple of years of college too. So what I did
because you
was
were not prepared to hit the mark.
no. I had no
But
problem
you
with
were
the
you were
classes.
having challenges. In other words, you voluntarily chose not to focus, but to do the other fun things you can do in college instead.
I was playing computer games. Yeah. I was playing the first one of the first MMOs online.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly. My mother didn't understand it all, and I was playing an online game called Gemstone, which is like a text adventure game but multiplayer. So like one of the early massively multiplayer games, and this was when big companies like GE would have mainframe computers, but they would have downtime at night, and so they had the great idea to start these online services with the off hours of their mainframe computers and let people use a dial-up modem to go into them to play games. So, but you paid $15 an hour for this.
Oh my gosh.
And so, I was on my parents' tab and they thought I had a small coke habit because I was spending $800 a month on this online game.
Okay.
And they didn't know they didn't understand. It's like, how could this not be drugs? I was like, no, it's an online computer game, and I'm a leader of the thieves guild. I run all the thieves in the game, and we call ourselves rangers because we didn't want to steal. We were like Robin Hood, right? Steal from the rich. I changed
So
the whole character of it.
in these days, how how different is this from the Dungeons and Dragons crowd?
It's actually very based in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of these rule sets come from Dungeons and Dragons, and Gemstone came from I believe, a Chaosium game, so like an offshoot of Dungeons and Dragons. And so, but you have role playing stats and strength, intelligence, dexterity. All the D&D staples are there. The combat works the same off of dice rolls. You're just seeing it simulated in text, on a computer screen at
sure.
like with on an ancient mainframe computer. And I think the most players we could have in the game was about 40 before it was too much for the servers to handle. So I was spending all my time there, and it was becoming a problem. I wasn't doing my studies, and so I ripped off my modem and I handed it to my roommate, and I said, don't give this back to me until the end of the year. And I walked right into the guidance counselor's office and I said, I want to do something with my life. I want to go to law school. And he said, what? And he looked at my grades. He said, are you sure? And I said, yeah. And then he was encouraging. He's like, I think you could turn it around. We could do a program for you to be pre-law. And the reason I wanted to do it was this.
And you must have done that because you ended up at BU, which is a respectable school.
Is it still? I mean, I know the former dean, so maybe I
It,
should.
let's go back to the 80s, okay?
Okay.
It's a respectable school. I don't know if any of them is respectable anymore.
Well, my advisor, I don't know if she was dean. She became dean. She was my advisor, and she told me some stuff, and I can share it with you because I think it's relevant, and enough time has passed. But yeah, I basically wanted. I didn't want to go into law school to practice law. I wanted to go into law school because I wanted to learn two things. I thought it would teach me critical thinking, and the other thing is, I thought it would be useful because I wanted to start a game company. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I thought that having a legal background would serve me well. So those are the two reasons I went. And I had no intention of actually practicing law. Um, I knew that from when I was in Rochester. I volunteered at the public defender's office to interview people who had been arrested the night before. So I spent a whole summer of court days doing that. And after that, I knew I didn't want to go and practice law, at least not
You didn't
criminal
want to
law.
be a trial lawyer or a criminal lawyer. Didn't necessarily mean you. I mean, you now realize just how well someone can do as a lawyer in the tech space
Yeah, yeah,
without
yeah.
getting
I
anywhere
mean,
near a courtroom.
so yeah, so I went to BU Law, and we actually a friend of mine uh, said, "Hey, why don't we found the world's first digital only law journal, the Journal of Science and Technology Law, out of Boston University, and we'll publish it on this thing called CD-ROM." I was like, "Oh, that's crazy! I'm in." And so yeah, we a bunch of us got together and we founded the first digital only law journal. Anyway, so we did that, and I wasn't a very good law student. History repeats itself until the very end. Uh, I had some unfortunate things. One is my father passed away first year of law school. That kind of threw me for a loop. And the second year of law school, I spent making my first commercial game. I was working with a friend who begged me to help him out on a game because he got a publisher with Interplay, and it was a CD-ROM game called Star Reach. Was this like an early precursor RTS, and in fact, it actually influenced Blizzard later on with their RTS series, along with Herzog Zwei, which is a Sega RTS precursor.
Explain what RTS means.
Oh yeah, RTS is a real-time strategy game. So it's like tabletop wargaming where you play with miniature soldiers and
Right.
you fight each other. Except it's all digital on computer, and usually set in a sci-fi or fantasy theme.
But this is
So
in contrast to the kind of game you were playing before, which was an action kind of
I was playing a text MMO in college, as well as on the graphical side of things, I was
MMO.
playing massively multiplayer online game.
Although
So
that abbreviation would not have existed at the time,
no, no, they were called.
and it wasn't all that massive. But scale, if that experience were scaled up to later,
Yep.
it would be you that would be in the MMO
The
category.
original term was MUD, multi-user dungeon, because
Ah,
that's what it was. You were in a dungeon together, and there were a couple of users, and you played together, that and chatted while you played through a text interface. And then later on, we got to massively multiplayer online games, which got shortened to MMO, and that's where we are today with that particular genre.
now in the first genre, in the mud that becomes the MMO, what was the percentage of participants who were boys, and what was the percentage of participants that were girls?
Oh, it was probably, oh, 99 to 1. It was really skewed. It wasn't until we saw the stats from World of Warcraft at Blizzard that we realized we were hitting we were hitting almost 50-50 at some points. So that was really a sea change, and we were also reaching an older audience too.
And that was even without forced efforts at representation, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, zero efforts there, and before the rise of mobile games, which also sort of like brought in a lot of people into gaming.
All right. So the end of law school, you're
So yeah, so I was
kind of
basically failing out of law school because I was working on my first game company and dealing with the passing of my father, and it was coming around, and I was like, you know what, I need to really not waste all this money that, that my parents have put in, and I need to graduate. So I what I did was, after I finished my work on the game, I sealed myself in my apartment for about 15 days before finals, because I figured out that there's no grades until the final exam, right? And they didn't add participation grades at that time or anything like that. So I didn't third year I didn't show up, and that's a common third year problem. Third years figure that out, but I had the added difficulty where I didn't do any of the work. And so what I did was, in the last, because I was working on my first serious commercial game,
right.
and or two of them. I did another one for Naughty Dog at that time too. I was working for them at the same time. So what I did was I sealed myself in my room. I had my groceries delivered. I had all food delivered, and I stocked up on like caffeine and NoDoz, and I crammed for 15 days. I did all my outlines. I walked in the exams, and I got the best grades of my life in law school. It was straight A's. So
So it's a good thing you didn't start that earlier because you would have ended up probably on real law review, and the faculty would have pushed you into becoming a judicial clerk, and we might not have World of Warcraft today.
That's true. That World of Warcraft would never have happened.
And you just be another multimillionaire, you know,
Well,
NPC lawyer.
one thing that really stuck with me was my contracts professor once said, no, wasn't my contracts professor. It was Archibald Cox. Archibald Cox was my civil. Was he civil procedure? He might have been civil procedure. So he was a Nixon era attorney, right?
Yeah, he
Famous
was
guy.
attorney general.
Yeah, famous guy. And he said, practicing law is living your life vicariously through other people's problems. And I said, I got enough of my own problems. I don't think I need the additional emotional damage.
Well, that's a strange thing for a gamer to say, though.
No, no. We create challenges, and we put other people, and we put our players through those challenges, and we don't care if we drag them through hell.
Fair enough. Okay. So you scratch out the law degree, and it ends up, you make a respectable run of it. You maybe even learn some stuff.
I learned a lot,
but when it's over, you turn your back on the legal profession.
Well, yeah, and I was already starting my first game company of my own, and so it was a lot of work to do that, and at the same time,
so you graduated law school '95, right?
Oh, I don't remember, a long time ago.
Okay, so
let's see. When did I graduate high school? 87. So no, it'd be like 90, right?
Oh, was that?
I don't know. I gotta look it up. But
all right, so you're now embarking on your first commercial game. Give us a sense of the technology available.
Yeah, so at the time,
on the serving side and on the player side.
Okay, so at that time, we're still in the world of dial-up modems, and the internet is being born for the first time. Mark Andreessen had just created, Netscape and the browser and all that stuff.
When I had when I had my first law firm job at the old K. Scholler firm in New York, if you would do a big multi-state Westlaw search, you could go to dinner while and probably that had more to do with the dial-up than it had to do with the crunching on the other side.
Oh, both.
Yeah.
I mean, to transmit that much text took a long time, but keep in mind that there wasn't very good search indexing technology at the time. Not like
not at all.
Yeah. So the problem was on both ends, really. But yeah, I mean, my primary internet access was America Online. That's the time, the era it was, and so games were 2D, very few were 3D, and if they weren't using a dedicated 3D graphics card because they didn't exist yet. And so that was the era of when I was making my first game, and Blizzard. And
so
when
people are largely playing on AOL over dial-up.
Yep.
They have computers with 256 megabytes of RAM.
Yeah. Basically,
monochrome graphics.
No, we had color graphics. We had
color by then. Okay.
VGA, and I think we had 256 colors if you had a high-end card, and so there was that. And around that time, there were dial-up gaming services that were starting to happen, including Blizzard's BattleNet. And BattleNet was rising because it was free compared to everybody else.
Now let's stop for a second. You have one Asian parent, and even before your father passed away, he was a military man. What was the point at which you had to explain to them why you, as a young adult, were so motivated by games?
That was a difficult series of events. I begged my mother for my first computer, an Apple II, in when we were living in Taiwan, and it was not even an authentic one; it was a clone, a Taiwanese clone of one, and I think it was $1,000, which is half the price of what it was in the U.S. right at the
That's a
time.
$1,000, folks. That is pretty close to $2,000 now.
Yeah, I don't I yeah I just remember it being a real reach for the family, right? And I begged and begged and begged and finally got one, and they didn't know what it was for. They didn't know, but all they did was they would come into my room and they would see me playing computer games and not doing my homework, and they'd be like, well, this is a waste of your time. How are you going to become a doctor this way? But I persisted, and I taught myself programming, and I was making my own games even back in high school, and it was never clear, to my mom what was going to happen with games until probably until Diablo and and World of Warcraft, I would say, and that's when it started to actually click, and it's like, oh, this is a real career. This is there is opportunity here, but that was a long time,
Yes, it
and
was.
law school bought me some time because that's respectable, right? So I went to law school, and my whole family's always been entrepreneurial. So when after law school, I said I want to start a company. My mom actually seeded me, like I don't know, it's like 20 grand, and also a huge expense for the family. And we started the company based off that. So
That's not too
um,
shabby.
it was very grateful for that. And especially when they didn't really see the point, my mom didn't see the point of games yet. But today she feels like that was a good investment in me. So that all worked out.
So then you're in business.
Yeah, then I'm in business and we're putting together our first game, and we've got a problem because it's the rise of the internet and nobody wants to talk about games. Investors only want to talk about websites or web technology. What are you doing? And I went over to uh, I guess a conference at Harvard where they had all these companies, web companies, come in, Web 1.0 before the crash, right? And they were not about making money. They were all about eyeballs. If we just get enough people viewing our site, we'll figure out how to monetize it later. And I said, you guys are nuts. I don't see a path here to you can't just keep gathering eyeballs without generating revenue. At some point, the rubber's got to hit the road, and just sheer number of users isn't enough. This is probably like GeoCities era. And then of course, we were trying to raise money to do the game and having problems until because there were the other thing that was happening in games is there were 4,000 games a year, which was a lot back then because you're competing for shelf space. There's no online distribution, right? So 4,000 titles a year competing for limited shelf space in like EB Games and GameStops and things like this. And I don't even think like Best Buy or the others had picked up on it yet. These are still small stores that were selling games, and it was brutal. There was a publisher shakedown. We would literally be talking about a deal with one publisher, and then the next week that person's gone because they've been gobbled up by another publisher, and that's where we got the big publishers, the Ubisofts, the EAs, things like that, through series of acquisitions. And so we had a tough time finding a deal, but eventually we did find two interested parties, and one was Bungie, a small Boston-based game developer, and the other one was Blizzard Entertainment,
Were you
a
still in
small
Boston?
California, yeah, still in Boston at the time, in Somerville, which we called Scummerville, and it's upscale now, but it was a little bit of a rougher neighborhood back then, and so basically Bungie made an offer on to do our game, which is a little top-down 2D, game, and then Blizzard called and said, we'll kick the crap out of any offer Bungie has. And so they flew me out to the West Coast, and I
Right.
met with. Oh,
Before we start doing the deal, what's your skill set at this point? What's the stuff that you're doing?
okay. So
Are you writing code?
Yeah, I'm writing code. I'm doing the
And this is all self-taught, of course.
all self-taught. So I did the sound engine. I was working on the AI, and then I was also doing some art for the game because I have the ability to 3D model. I can 3D model what we call hard surfaces. So not characters, not any not animals, nothing like that. But if you want like a robotic hand, or if you want a crate in the game or levels or things like that, then that's the stuff that I would
Or
build.
Zuck.
Or what?
Or is it someone like Zuck, who's not really an who's an inanimate object, basically,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah, I could do Zuckerberg. Yeah. At least his pre-cool phase where he before the perm and and the
right.
weights and everything else. Yeah, I could probably do that with some
Or
modeling
at
primitives.
least as well as his metaverse.
Yeah, I could do better than that. so so yeah, that's we went in with Blizzard and we signed with Blizzard and we started doing the game, and they were having a problem focusing on multiple projects, which was a theme at Blizzard at the time. They were a one game studio. They had Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, and they were trying to do this little game called Diablo, and they were trying to do this little game called Crixa, which is our other game that what we were contracted with Blizzard with. And I remember them calling me up and say, "Listen, we really love the work you do. In fact, a lot of the advice you've given us let us graphically revamp StarCraft, which was having some graphical issues at the time. We'd like to pay off your milestones for a couple of months and invite your whole 7-person team to come work for us." And I said, "Thanks, that's great, but I like to be independent." But I looked around, I couldn't find any offers from these internet investors because we weren't a web-based game. So I said to the team, "Look, we got a choice here. We can all take jobs at Blizzard, or we can go our separate ways." And I'm the only one who accepted the Blizzard offer from this small Blizzard company. And I flew out to California. I drove out actually, and because I'd never driven cross country before, I wanted to
Did you
try
take
that.
the company with you? In other words, even though your team
Oh no,
wasn't interested, were you the only owner?
yeah, I was the only owner and so I just dissolved the company and headed out to the West Coast. So there's no, so I still own the IP for all of that stuff back then. And in fact, we actually put part of it, the main spaceship from the game that I was working on, we put that into StarCraft as a sort of object in the map. There's a crashed spaceship in one of the tile sets, and that's actually the ship from from the game I was working on. And they asked me for permission to do that, and I said, "Sure, go ahead, let's do it." So StarCraft was my first game there, working at Blizzard, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was an amazing time. We were we fit into one small office building. We were 60 people or less, and it was like band of brothers. We would work hard during the day. We would play games together all night, and then we would wake up and crawl into work or roll out of our offices
Were there
and
any showers involved at any point?
very infrequently.
Because that's what they always told me about you guys.
It's that part's true, very infrequently. And we actually had to have, there was one guy who really took that to heart, and I think there were some conversations there until that behavior changed.
So the timeline now, it's what, 2005?
No, no idea. I have no
No
idea
idea.
where we are.
Okay.
No, we're not even in the 2000s yet. So
Okay, we're
we're
still in the
we're we're in
90s.
the 90s. Yeah, this is probably Y2K.
But this is all right before the world came to an end on Y2K.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you're this is really like a classic mm, startup world.
Oh yeah.
You're playing, but you're living,
There's no money in it. We there was Bungie was selling software out of a Ziploc bag at Macworld Expo. Now they're huge, right? Blizzard had simple, humble beginnings. we were, the rite of passage was when you arrived at Blizzard, you built your own desk from IKEA, basically, or the equivalent of IKEA. It was basically sawdust furniture. It weighed a ton, and your first job was to build your desk. And that was the rite of passage to becoming a Blizzard employee.
So the Blizzard employees boy girl ratio at this moment in time.
Let me one. We had a wonderful admin. She was really like the den mother of the Boy Scouts, and she was fantastic, and helped hold us together. But it was tough to get women into games. So listen, rewind just prior to me joining Blizzard. I wanted my company to have more women, right? And I said, let's try to get more women involved. And so I went out to MIT and I put flyers out, and I specifically had flyers in front of the women's engineering group and all this stuff.
What motivated you?
I just
Seemed like it would just
wanted
be
to,
a good idea socially, mentally.
I thought it would be a good idea. I thought because
Yeah.
I was a big D&D player, still am, and uh we loved having women at the table, right? Like, and so we tried to get like
Girls are fun.
the girls are fun. Imagine that. And they're great at role playing games, and they're a lot of fun around the table, and and it was as we're gaming together. And so there's this whole myth that we gate kept women out of Dungeons and Dragons, and we gate kept women out of gaming, and that wasn't the case at all. We were so nerdy. We were thrilled if any woman had any sort of interest in what we were doing, and we went out of our way to basically include them
So you went to the
into.
engineering building at MIT to look for some hot babes.
I didn't expect hot babes in engineering. I didn't care. I was like, I just, I really tried, and I could not get women interested because it wasn't seen as a serious career. It wasn't seen as something that was stable. It wasn't. It wasn't seen as something that made money. It wasn't, right? And you certainly weren't going to meet the husband of your dreams potentially at that time, especially since none of us showered back then. and so, it was a very tough sell, Ron. And it met with zero success. And even at Blizzard, I continued to try. And, eventually I did manage to find some women who were interested, pre World of Warcraft, pre mobile gaming, before it all exploded, and there was a lot of interest. And we did get some women on board. But it was tough going, and there wasn't, look, we didn't gatekeep, but there wasn't a lot of interest in my cohorts in getting more women on board. That was, I think, something that was maybe myself and a couple others that would like, hey, maybe this would be interesting, right? Maybe this would be good for us. And but nobody actively kept them out. That's a complete myth, at
So
least at the places I've been.
believe it or not, 40 minutes has passed. I mean, I could listen to this all day,
Oh,
but let's fast forward to Gamergate.
yeah. So
You've
I,
established yourself. You have been lead guy in a couple of big games.
yeah, lead for
Stuff
World of
is
Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, good stuff. Everything's fine, you thought, or maybe not. And then what happens?
Uh, okay. So, I had sold my company to Chinese investors. We didn't see eye to eye. There was some very interesting stuff that happened there. They wanted WoW with guns, and I said that's a sure way to failure. Why don't we keep doing what's working now, which is the beta of the game? They disagreed, and they were trying to bring in major investors, and they wanted me to do some things which I felt were at the very least unethical. And at the other end, after talking to a specialist attorney in DC about this, I felt like it would be a legal problem. And so I said, I don't want to sign this paperwork. I don't want to allege these things about the health of the company because it's untrue. And they said, listen, everyone's getting a deal here. You'll get 2 million. And I said no. And I'm on record with the FBI with this. And so people say that never happened. I'm like, go file a Freedom of Information Act. You'll see, you'll see the statements I gave the FBI. And and so the day after, or rather the week after I refused to sign this, they unlawfully removed me as CEO. My contract says they can't do that without terminating me, but
You were
they want
CEO of.
Red 5 Studios, a company I founded, making a game called Firefall, and we had a
So,
very successful beta.
and was it owned by Blizzard?
No, no,
Or
no. I left Blizzard to start my own company.
right? Okay, okay.
Did the whole venture capital thing, Sand Hill Road. Eventually bought out those investors. Sold the company to another Chinese company, and that's when we had some problems. They wanted one type of game. I wanted a different type of game. They wanted to raise a bunch of money, and I felt uncomfortable with the methods that they wanted to use there. I didn't feel that accepting money in order to play along was correct either. And so, I decided that I wasn't going to sign. And then a week later, they say, "Well, we're removing you as CEO." I say, "Well, that's against my contract. I'm going to resign." And so then I resigned a week after that, and they called me. They called my lawyer back, and said, "Listen, we want him back. How about 1 million just to have him come back?" Because they wanted my name to seal the deal with these new investors. And when they couldn't get my name, a very interesting smear piece came out in an Asian newspaper that was spread all throughout the West. Interesting how that works, isn't it? Anyways, and so that was devastating to me. I couldn't believe that. I was like, wow, this happens. And perhaps I was a little naive at the time. But that's around the time that Gamergate 1 happened. And I was also very naive about that because I had a lot of press contacts, worked with them. I couldn't understand why the press was maligning gamers and accusing them of all sorts of horrible things because gamers had said, "We think you have an ethics problem. You're giving a good review to a game, and this reviewer has a personal relationship with the developer of the game, the sole developer of the game." And that's how that whole situation started. And this history has been scrubbed, by the way. The whole origins of Gamergate 1 is erased from the internet because journalists went on a warpath and they paper mached this narrative over the whole thing. And Gamergate 1 was made up of all walks of life, minorities, Caucasians, left, right, center. Everybody was involved with that, and including some very big names like Cernovich. Cernovich was GG1. People probably don't remember that, but we were all there, and we were all saying, "Hey, there's a problem here with ethics in gaming journalism."
Part of it really shows up everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. We're in the same county, so yeah. but but yeah, he was actually big on GG1. So was Adam Baldwin, of course, coined the term, right? Gamergate. And it stuck. And this really opened my eyes because I started a petition, no, an open letter, sorry, saying, "Hey, journalists, we fought together against censorship and of games when it was the Jack Thompson era, and and conservatives were trying to cancel games, and especially Jack Thompson and a bunch of DAs were after us." I said, "This is the same thing again. Why don't we're friends? Gamers and journalists are friends. Let's sit down and talk about it." And for that, I was instantly blacklisted by the press. I had additional hit pieces written about me, and this was not attacking them at all. This was just a, "Hey, you're awesome. We're awesome. Let's get together." They wouldn't have it. And so at some point I said, "F it, I'm Gamergate." And at that point, I went to Gamergate events. It was real interesting because I'd go to these events and, a literal bomb threat would be called in or something like that. And then I'd wait for the press to pick it up the next day and nobody did.
So, one sentence or two sentence explanation to newbies. When we say Gamergate, what do we mean?
All right. So if you look up Gamergate on Wikipedia, it's a harassment campaign, which
Right.
is
And
untrue.
it's a lockdown entry, by the way.
Yeah, which is untrue. But if you look at the Asian and the Chinese translation of that page, their page, you'll get the truth. Okay. So if you go to the pull down and select Chinese and then run that through Google Translate, you will understand that it was a movement that started when gamers realized that gaming press might be corrupt, might not be telling you the truth, might be promoting games out of favoritism and sexual favors rather than objective gamer values like fun, interactivity, and everything else. And this is when nobody thought the press would lie about anything, right? And we were all, and I thought, I really thought that the journalists were on our side. They just didn't understand what was happening, right? And so this exploded because Gamergate revealed that there was a secret group of game journalists on a mailing list that was colluding to publish stories at the same time with a certain narrative and spin. And we exposed this.
Like
And
the
then
journalist.
the journalist, yes. And we exposed this, and that drove them up the wall. And they started publishing a slew of hit pieces against anybody in Gamergate and the whole movement as a whole. And it was and then and then that's when the culture wars started. And this is important because I don't think people realize nobody had any doubts about the press up until then. Gamergate was really at the forefront of people's eyes being opened about the types of narrative and manipulation that we see in the press today that everyone now says of course, and that's why distrust in the media is so high, legacy media. That all started with GG1, and there were some very prominent figures in there. So a very enterprising news outlet, Breitbart. Am I pronouncing it right?
Breitbart?
Breitbart, yeah.
Yeah.
Picked up on this as a hot topic and started publishing articles on it. And it all led up to 2016 and Trump's election, and we were blamed for that. The joke was Gamergate gets blamed for everything. And in a sense, partially true because we opened people's eyes to the fact that the media wasn't telling you everything that was kosher, right? And
So,
so
well, it's funny you should use that word because it sounds like you were the Jews of the internet, blamed for everything, for opening up eyes.
So yeah, that really opened my eyes. That's the moment where I saw, and I thought it was contained. I was still naive. I said, oh, that's just game journalism. Professionals wouldn't be like this. And so we appealed to the, professional journalists belong to a group called the Society of, I don't know, ethics and journalism or something like this. And we got the attention of one journalist in there who was like, yeah, this game reporting obviously isn't following standard journalistic practices. Of course, we didn't know at the time that it was actually infested throughout all of journalism, right? And it wasn't until 2016 and those of us in Gamergate, which was millions of people worldwide, by the way, started to see the same sort of things happening in legacy media about politics as we did in our little bubble of video games. And we said, this is a bigger problem. The corruption and the manipulation that we're seeing in game journalism is actually everywhere. And we were the first to see this. And we were so, listen, back in Gamergate 1, we were so pervasive on Twitter and social media. I could get anything trending. Like if I started a topic, it would be trending that week. It was because there was no filtering, there was no algorithm.
Right.
And that's when all this started. And they started developing tools like shadow banning and
Really? We can
trendless.
blame you guys for that too?
Yes, absolutely. You can blame Gamergate for all the social media tools that were designed to control information because that's when it all started. And we were the first ones to notice it and document it and actually measure it
And you also had some understanding.
from the technical side. Yeah,
Right.
how this was possible. And oh, we got blasted for it. I got blasted for it. You're a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat. The algorithm is completely automatic. It's no human intervention whatsoever, yada yada yada. And of course, we were right. It was all true. These tools were invented to fight Gamergate on behalf of the journalists because it had taken over all of social media, especially Twitter at the time. So the genesis of the tools that were later employed by Twitter, especially in politics and COVID and everything else, were all invented from Gamergate to control the fact that we were getting our message out so loud.
This is a life-changing interview for me. I didn't really appreciate this. And anyone who's ever interacted with you knows that this is not Mark Kern putting himself at the center of the galaxy. This description rings true, and I think the references to Gamergate bled through to normies like me without much understanding. But you're really putting it into an incredibly valuable context. So I mean, to a large extent, you guys really drove the social media culture war, which in many respects ends up driving the meat space culture war in no small respect.
That's why I jumped into Gamergate too, because it's not just about games.
So explain.
Um, so listen, I went quiet for a while, especially after COVID. So I was one of Cernovich and I were probably one of the first people to call COVID. Um, when back in what was that, 2019, late 2019. We both
That's
tweeted
probably
about
when
it.
you popped up on my radar. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and we both mentioned it for the first time. And I said, listen, this is going to impact the world and it's going to hurt us more economically than it will from a human casualty standpoint. And I was very concerned about it. And it was a very, very distressing time for me. My whole worldview, especially after the lockdowns, I didn't want to be in a world like this, right? Like, what was the point? And it was a very, but I did what I could. So I put together a group. I said, let's try to find, some drugs that can find this. So there was like, you know, uh, protein folding. It's a huge collective online effort to uh, fold proteins, which is very computationally expensive, and to make new discoveries that could lead us to cures for different things. I said, let's start a computing group for that for COVID. So we did, and it became the largest network group of volunteer computers out there donating their time to protein folding to try to lend computing resources to finding drugs that could fight this.
Thereby
And
presenting a gigantic threat to the narrative.
well, I don't know if that was even on their radar at the time, but we had a whole bunch of computing power. And there's someone the other day who just posted on X, oh, I finally shut down my node. I forgot I had it running. He had it running for all his time since 2019. And I'm like, well, we did good work. So I did that, and then before, and I said, here's how to prep for COVID. I was letting people know that they should. This is before lockdowns. I was like, get some supplies together because this is, we don't know the impact. And I said and I said, don't worry about the health impact until you see emergency rooms overflowing. If we have that, then you've got a real thing, which we never really got to that point. We pseudo got to it in a couple places, but never really reached that point. And I said, listen, we don't know how dangerous this thing is, but I've been reading scientific papers on SARS, which is a precursor, somewhat related. And I had an incident with SARS where I came back from a business trip from China. I had to be quarantined, ordered quarantined by the CDC because they thought I had SARS. So that was my first experience with lockdown procedures, and they were horrible and they were inadequate at the hospital. And in fact, they had left a vent trigger open that flooded the entire room at the floor of the hospital. And when I pointed it out, the doctor chewed out the floor staff for it. I knew then we were unprepared. So when COVID came around, I knew we were unprepared. And I said, listen, we don't know what's going on or how severe this is, but I think, I've read a couple SARS papers, and here's a couple things. Regular masks aren't going to work. If any mask is going to work at all, it's got to be an N95 or better because of the size of SARS particles. We didn't know anything about COVID at the time. Oh, I don't know what happened with my Abby. We lost track. Let me see if I can fix this. So and I said, listen, I think we can use UV light to sterilize. And so I said, here's how to construct a UV sterilization box. Here's the right wavelength of UV light that you need. Here's how where you order the lights off Amazon. And we just made a tinfoil box out of a file box, and we hung lights in it and wires, and we put our phones and keys in it whenever we got home, right? So I was doing what I could, but it really freaked me out. COVID was like, I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know if it was going to be serious or not. And like I said, my litmus test was the emergency room test, right? And which thankfully we never got there. And but it was a time where I was completely distracted by the health of the world and the state of the world that was going to emerge out from it. But anyways, that's I, I don't know how we got on this topic, but
Well, you were explaining. I asked you, tell us about Gamergate 2.
yeah.
So
Oh,
this was
I'm
this
sorry.
was something that you had to use to frame.
Right. And so, during that time there was even more suppression, especially around the COVID stuff. And so I immediately clammed up. I stopped talking because I didn't want to get my account banned because I didn't want to stick out as some sort of target. And I was just waiting to see where the world was going. And so I stayed silent that whole time. I tweeted about very innocuous things. I wasn't very controversial. Uh, you know, and I stopped talking about COVID after it
You,
got super political.
you did post some of the best kitten videos during that period, though. I
Oh,
think.
thank you. I do love cats. Uh, and it was a period of intense suppression of social media, and so I didn't want to stick my head out. But what happened in February, March of this year, and of course, Elon buys Twitter at that time, and so it's starting to be free to talk about things again. And so when February, March came around, we had a similar issue arise that was Gamergate 1 all over again. We had a gamer. His name is Cabrutus. That's his handle. Cabrutus Rambo on X. He was fed up with the woke infestation of video gaming because that was happening. We had a lot of DEI policies, especially in 2019, 2020, that COVID era. That was a time when the game market took off. Demand was really high, and all sorts of money was pouring into gaming. But this money had strings attached. This money said you will have DEI, you will, enforce certain narratives, and in order to qualify for this cash. And so that's when you had an invasion of consultants and activists in gaming that were less focused on entertainment and more focused on promoting a particular political agenda and ideology. And this was ruining games because Elon has said DEI kills art in video games. He's absolutely right. It takes you out of the story. It makes the story subservient to a political message, which weakens the story, props up characters without justification, and tries to erase the past, tries to erase past characters, like, you know, trotting on the memory of Batman with Suicide Squad, and so everything in the past was bad and evil, and only things in the future for the modern audience are good. And this is what gamers started to react against. And this gamer, Cabrutus Rambo, made a list. He made a Steam curation list. Steam is the largest online distributor of PC gaming, and you can create a group there that isn't, or it doesn't do reviews. It just recommends games, right? And it's very innocuous. You can't sit there and write paragraphs about things on it very much. It's just he put a list of games together that were, he called it uh, DEI detected. Like, these games have been infested with DEI policies, and I don't recommend them. And that's all he said. And the source, he would link back to the actual consultant website, this company called Sweet Baby Inc., who you're familiar with. And they had a list of clients on their website and games that they worked on, and their whole consultancy is based off pushing DEI and ESG into gaming. If you wanted to have a consultant to help you with that stuff, you went out, you hired Sweet Baby Inc. So he put this list together. They went nuts because the last thing they want is for this thing to be public. I don't know why. They think it's a good thing, and they tout it as a great thing, but somehow they don't want any publicity about it. And so he put together this list, and they tried to cancel him. There was a Sweet Baby Inc. employee who said, "Hey, light this guy up, mass report him. Let's take his games away by canceling his Steam account." And I said, okay. And then an article came out, and I think this, yeah, Kotaku published an article with a reporter you're very familiar with, who basically said, who Sweet Baby Inc. is fine. It's not who you think they are, and proceeded to personally attack Kabrutus and malign him, and leave out his story about how SBI employees tried to cancel him. And by the way, a lot of Sweet Baby Inc. employees were on the opposite side of Gamergate 1, doing things like doxing and harassing people constantly. They were part of this company. All right. I don't know if they are today. Back in March, they were. And I highlighted that. And I looked around and I said, oh, this is Gamergate all over again. Who's going to step up? Someone's going to step up. Let's, and when they do, I'll join, And I looked around, and nobody was stepping up. All of them had, become famous in other ways. They moved on to political careers. They moved on to other commentary, and nobody was sticking up for Kabrutus. Nobody was sticking up for the gamer. And I said, okay, maybe I will. But I remember the pain of Gamergate 1. And I said, if I do, this is gonna hurt.
Right, because after all, during the COVID thing, your decision was not to stand up and take a stand, but to
yeah, because I wanted to maintain the platform. I said, this is the only social media presence I have, and I want to promote my game at some point when it's ready. And so I said, I want to keep this, and there's no sense in getting canceled and not having any venue at all in which to speak. And they were canceling people left and right. So yeah, that's when I didn't take a stand, and I was hesitant in March to stick my neck out again, not because I thought that the platform would come down on me, because Elon made it clear, and it was clear he wasn't going to do that, but because I knew I would be personally canceled, and I didn't have anybody else with me at the time. Because Gamergate 1, the way we diffused the attacks was we had a joke where we all claimed to be the leader of Gamergate 1. So there was no central figure. All right.
I am Spartacus.
Yes. Or for Warhammer 40K players out there, I am Alfarius. Same sort of thing. So we all claimed to be the leader of Gamergate, and they didn't have a central target. Well, this time I knew there was going to be a central target, and it was going to be me. But I don't know, Ron. I'm the type of guy who has to speak up. I remember, and I guess we never changed, because back in high school, I had a chemistry teacher who was bullying students constantly, badgering them. It was beyond the Socratic method. It was basically making them feel bad about themselves. And one day, by calling on them and then basically almost making them cry, right? And one day I just stood up and I said, we've had enough. I've had enough. And I'm going to tell you exactly what you're doing wrong. And I stood up in front of the entire class, and I told them off for about 20 minutes. And the whole class, was stunned, right? And then I sat down. But after that, the guy left me alone. It was weird.
That's usually how it works with bullies.
and I barely passed with a D. It was chemistry, right? But I passed.
I also barely passed chemistry because you have to really spend chemistry. You really have to spend time working on to learn it. So that's out.
and yeah, it was too much. It was too much memorization of really long words for me. But yeah, I've always been the type of guy who, look, I could have, like, even in my company, right? I could have taken the 2 million and it probably would have been fine, right? I didn't. Anytime I see something wrong, Ron. I'm the type of guy that's got to open his mouth, and it's an idiotic thing to do in many cases, but it's me, right? This is me. And so in March, I said, this is wrong. And we have to highlight all this DEI stuff that's ruining gaming. We have to highlight all the journalistic stuff again, 10 years later, that's ruining gaming. And here's what we're going to do. And I said, we're going to point out DEI and ESG and how it has changed gaming for the worse. We're going to take our message to YouTubers because they are the new media, and that's going to be far more impactful. And the journalists will never publish our side of the story. And I said, we're going to, and I jokingly pulled from COVID, 2 years to stop the spread. We're going to stop buying these woke AAA games for 2 years, and we're going to financially hit them in the pocketbook by doing so. And one of the first companies we're going to do, I said, is Ubisoft. I said, look, Ubisoft's got 2 games for this year, and that's it. Tentpole games. Everything else is minor. We hit that, and they were terribly agenda-driven games, right? We hit that. That's going to send a wake-up call. And it did. Ubisoft is looking for a buyer now. They're on the ropes financially. We really crippled them. And that's when I found all of these people, all these YouTubers who were willing to talk about this stuff. That's when I found so many people online willing to write about this stuff and post about this stuff that we started the whole thing up again. Now, listen, I can't take credit for this. Cabrutus really started this whole thing with his list, and he still has the list and the website. It's like the second or third largest group on Steam, which is really huge for curation of games. It's almost 500,000 people. And and so many YouTubers joined in, and they're the real tip of the spear, right? They're out publishing the news and the stories and everything else. They're doing all the work. What I did was maybe just give a plan, right? And then everybody took that plan up and executed it brilliantly. And we have had a profound impact this year in AAA gaming, where every single woke game that has tried to come out has utterly fallen flat on its face because we've informed the consumer about what was in the game. And we haven't even played it yet, right? We're just posting video clips of the game itself. We're posting the developers' opinions, which shockingly turned out to be, we hate white people, we hate gamers, and that was the common thread. And I was like, wow, you can't hate your own customers. And then I was getting reports from my friends in the industry about the sort of discrimination that they were facing as male white developers in the industry. So yeah, that was crazy. And so that's how GG2 started, and they really ran with it. And I just let my plan and the initial idea. It's like, how about we do this? And they took it off. They took off with that and ran with that. And we're at a point now where we are winning bigly, as they say. And it's been a banner year for gamers and Gamergate 2, and the journalists are gone. They're not there anymore. Downsizing, layoffs, they lost this round. They won in Gamergate 1. They got the official Wikipedia entry. They managed to tar and feather that movement. They have resoundingly lost in Gamergate 2. And that's thanks to every gamer who got involved with this.
Amazing. It took us a little bit long to get here, but this is the Rosetta Stone for everybody who's following this and the stuff that's come since then. And Grummz, Mark Kern, whoever's left listening to this, thank you so much. And we're not gonna cut a second because it was fast. Every second of it was great, and you seem to have a pretty good grip on what it takes to explain this. Almost as if you went to law school, or almost in spite of the fact that you went to law school.
Maybe in spite.
But I really appreciate your patience with the scheduling and rescheduling of this, and for spending so much time to bring us from, the development of your interest in this topic to Gamergate 2 and this aspect of the culture war that's being fought on social media. And the interesting thing to me is that in no way do you come across as a guy with a cultural agenda as such. And I think that's what people have been led to think about Gamergate, which is that it's this, as you say, the edge of the spear in the social in the culture war. That's not what I'm hearing.
We want good games. We want to save jobs in the industry. Over 30,000 jobs lost, by the way, thanks to poor business decisions driven by DEI. This has to stop if we're going to have a vibrant AAA gaming industry. And so we take no pleasure in it, but we have to get the money people to understand these aren't the types of games that gamers want to buy, and it's not going to keep your guys employed, and it's not going to make you any profit. So please listen to gamers and give them what they want as a product, and you will thrive. That's the very simple message.
Thank you, Mark. Great talking to you. Let's
Absolutely,
stay in
Ron.
touch.
Thanks for having me.